The Outsider. Wife and I are in our late 30s, together for 6, and married for 2 come this December, no children. In July, wife's mother was hospitalized, and we made the decision to move to so wife could help take care of mother. I lined up a job, loaded up our house, and I moved our stuff to the in-laws' home several hundred miles away, a few weeks before my wife. Later in August, mother-in-law and wife joined us. Mother-in-law and my wife fought every day about every possible thing, and I saw my wife sinking into a deep depression. October 20th, I moved myself and the wife into an apartment about 20 miles away from the in-laws, figuring the distance would help. October 24th, wife is acting incredibly disrespectful and hostile to me. I probe to find out what's going on, and I get the "I love you but I'm not in love with you" speech. Red flags go up because I deliberately gone out of my way to be the supportive husband the past several months. I notice the wife acting suspicious on the computer, trying to hide windows from me when I walk by. Thursday evening, my heart falls out of my chest. I dump the server logs from the router and find that she has been chatting on a dirty site. More so, her master has instructed her to document their conversation and their one meeting thus far, where she exquisitely detailed the acts she had performed on him in the back of his truck. To make matters even better, she had even posted pictures of herself on the website, though thankfully probably no one but me and her doctor could identify her from them. After reading the profile for a few minutes and their meetings, I literally went into shock. When I confronted her, I think my voice was muted. She at first denied it and then began to weep violently. She said, "I guess I should get packed up and leave," and I told her no, it's late, and we continued to talk through the night. Eventually in the night, she told me she no longer wanted to be married and I deserved someone better. She had her brother pick her up that Friday morning and take her back to the mother's house. I eventually cry myself to sleep and am woken up late Friday afternoon by a call from her. She tells me she has made the worst mistake ever and does want to be married to me, and asks me if it's too late. I say no, but if you come back, it has to be complete honesty, no contact with anyone outside of certain friends and family, marriage counseling, and church. I tell her to sleep on it to be certain, and she calls me early the next morning to make sure I will pick her up. She comes back and we go through and delete emails and profiles, and I have the joy of reading through the sickening details. At some point we go into a hysterical bonding thing, which paused briefly and has resumed again within the last few days. I make her inform the other guy there can be no contact, and I left him a message telling him never to contact her again. The first 2 weeks went surprisingly well, but we hit a setback when browsing through her phone logs and Facebook. I discovered a 2-month emotional affair with thousands of texts and hours of calls every day. She apparently ended this without telling me that Friday, which is confirmed by her phone logs. I've really had a hard time with the emotional affair, as I only have her details of it, as by this time wife has sanitized the phone. She should have disclosed it to me under the conditions of returning, but she has had absolutely zero contact with guy since returning except for the no contact letter. She is completely remorseful, apologetic, and willing to work on our marriage. Our communication has improved, and I've learned some painful things about myself and things that happened with her extended family. Next week she is going to get a psychiatric evaluation because we both believe, in hindsight, that she was in a deep depression before we even moved. Recovery is early but going well so far. I still have nightmares and may even go see a psych myself. I'm normally very self-controlled and my emotions have been all over the place. The first 2 weeks I had what felt like panic attacks, but haven't noticed them in the past 2 weeks. I think we would be further along in rebuilding trust if she had divulged the emotional affair to me, but she didn't. I have made it clear to her if she has any voluntary contact with either of them, we are done permanent like. Which is not to be threatening, she just seems to do better when she has clearly articulated boundaries and complete understanding of my expectations. Any tips on letting go resentments and mental images? I have forgiven her but want to get on with the forgetting. We've done 1 marriage counselor visit, we'll do more after her consultation with psych. We are also doing some of the marriage builders things and are together pretty much every waking moment aside from my full-time work and her part-time work. I believe she is being honest and open with me and is committed to doing the work we need to. I have the passwords to everything, and we deleted an email account and changed her phone number. No contacts have been sent from me and from her to the out-of-state text, chat guy, and the in-town guy. The in-town guy sounded frightened. I left a very specific message the night I found out. She has been exposed to her mother, my mother, and a few of our friends and family, who can actually offer positive reinforcement to her. I have complete access to all emails and Facebooks. She knows and acknowledges explicitly that any inappropriate contact, and we are done, period. As far as remorse and consequences, she's cried till she's made herself sick more times than I can count in the past month. In her words, the chat with the out-of-state guy wasn't as significant. She understands now why it was more significant to me in a way, since it was so time-consuming and the volume. I understand where your recommendations of caution and mistrust are coming from. Trust has to be rebuilt from the ground up. She is not fighting me on anything, not making any excuses, and cooperating as best as she is able. I monitor all phone activity and internet usage diligently. The chances of her having a burner phone are slim to none. What my wife did was foul, but I believe she has a sincere desire to repair our marriage, make amends, and never go there again. I know she fully understands if anything similar ever happens again I will walk away forever. 5-month update. We are doing well. We talk about things as we need to. There is still crying here and there and some moments of anger, on part for what happened, for herself, for her choices. Boundaries, particularly with family, are firmly set. It's more or less came out that her mother is extremely narcissistic, and my wife was giving too much credit to her mother's input. It hadn't ever occurred to her that what her mother was telling her could be horribly wrong. Found out her mother and brother had been undermining our relationship from our engagement. Long and short, unless the wife twists herself up into knots to satisfy her mother's narcissistic ego, she's a horrible person and daughter. Solution: her family will be treated cordially from a distance, and I won't have much to do with them barring an epiphany. She's been more or less cut off by her mother and brother. It came out she had some childhood ex, and that is being addressed in counseling. Boundaries are all firmly in place. She understands my love is unconditional, but my continued presence in the marriage is very conditional. 1. Complete transparency. 2. Boundaries: no flirting, appropriate work relationships, no texting, no separate emails, Facebooks, no girl night outs, though this was never an issue. 3. Regularly meeting with the psychiatrist for the foreseeable future. 4. Aggressively rebuffing any inappropriate contacts, criticisms, etc. 5. Attending church with me. 6. Exercise and decent nutrition. She's doing well. She is a kind person that let depression and outside influences take her to a place she should never have gone to. I don't excuse anything she did. It sucked. It damaged her probably as much as me. She understands our marriage is contingent upon being present and being a partner. I'm still coping with my grief, though it's certainly less frequent and manageable for the most part. She's definitely begun to recultivate her empathy outside the influence of the worst parts of her family. I'm in the gym 6 days a week, told the wife to never take me for granted again. I continue to monitor phone, email, etc. It's not with the same frequency as before, but it's a fairly frequent check-in. It feels like a normal part of life, and I almost think all married people should do it. It prevents the accumulation of any incremental bad choices. I entertain some of the lighter aspects of it with her. I've got limits. As she required sanity, I think she understood that some things are better as fantasies, and the actuality can be disappointing. She had a lot of her things intertwined in her head with guilt, and that's getting healed. She knows too, as long as it doesn't involve another person or degradation, I'll listen to what's in her head without shaming her or criticizing. I'm very straight arrow, and I think before she was afraid to bring certain things to me for fear of rejection. Recovery is going well. I'm in the gym 4 to 6 times a week. Wife continues to do the work to help heal us. For me, that's what it came down to, her willingness to put in the daily effort to have a satisfying union. You can't bully someone into that. They either have the desire for it or not, and I refuse to be in shadow of a marriage. She is doing the work. Daily she wishes she could undo what she did. She wasn't made to cheat though. Some people can do it without any repercussions to their inner self. My wife isn't one. I think if a lot of these silly people could feel a sample of the pain they are going to feel afterwards, they would never stray. Mother's Day was rough for the wife. We don't have children. Depending on the state of our reconciliation, we may try next year, though it will require IVF. She has bad plumbing. Part of my wife's breakdown was caused by my wife's narcissistic mother, who had been grinding our marriage down, unbeknownst to me, and shredding my wife. My wife's psychiatrist has praised her for setting her boundaries with her mother. I've told her it's appropriate boundaries or I'm done, and she hasn't spoken to her in a month. Wife tried to be a decent daughter and call today. No answer and no return call. At church, the pastor says, "Lucky are you who have a good mother," and even luckier those who have a godly mother. She lost it and had to step outside for a moment to compose herself. She's doing a good job so far. She takes her lumps and is learning better to express if she feels I'm being unfair. Sometimes I am. I don't think being betrayed gave me a lock on always being right. We recently celebrated the wife's birthday. I had a shallow moment, told her they don't seem to make a card for you or a crazy cheating bee for a bit, but recently you've been doing a good job. Love you, wife. Her face fell. Really though, as I was trying to pick out a card, all the sentiments expressed therein seemed shallow and fake and pedestal putting. Had wife look at this, she asked me to note immediately after I laughed. She also says Hallmark is a liar. They don't make a card for every occasion. Few months later, recovery is going well so far for the most part. A lot of it seems to be mainly accumulating distance from the events and accumulating good days together. Why seems to plague every betrayed spouse? The answer is simple: because your spouse chose to. The hows of what lead them to that place may definitely be worth pursuing, and probably with a trained professional. My love for my wife is unconditional. My continued presence and participation in this relationship is contingent upon her ongoing counseling with a psychiatrist for the next few years to unravel some dysfunction. I think the value of time between wherever you are at now and D-Day is important. Time may not heal wounds, but it can soften pains and increase our capacity to deal with them constructively. Wife remains remorseful, and her communication skills and capacity to self-validate have definitely increased. I occasionally still check phone records and emails, but not with an uncontrollable urgency. I think periodic diligence is good even for couples who haven't experienced infidelity. Sunlight and transparency is a potent counter to conditions that can nurture seeds of infidelity. One of the most powerful toxic agents in her life was her mother, who is for all intents and purposes firewall from us now. Tomorrow I'm going to meet with a new individual counselor. I've kept up my work in the gym and will probably try to compete in a powerlifting competition early next year. I don't expect to win, but I think I can place respectably. People seem to think that if they are nice enough, persistent enough, if they just keep eating crap long enough, their spouse will take pity on their poor pathetic self and give them some crumbs of love. Stop it. If you want to save your marriages, stop it. You don't have to be an uber alpha guy, but you do have to be a determined man who had boundaries and enforces them, and be completely unwilling to tolerate disrespectful treatment. Time and time again, the passive, the tolerant will get used, abused, and discarded. Embrace respect for yourself and you may have a chance. Go the route of Mr. Nice Guy and you are guaranteeing misery for yourself. My comment: OP shut his wife's affair down. It almost went to physical if he hadn't noticed. Would this be okay with you? Story 2. So, I'm here because I'm lost like most. I do not have the great close friends that I can confide in. I have family, but while one person knows my situation, there are things that I do not want to divulge. So here is my story. Sorry it is long. My wife and I married a little over 12 years ago. She is my best friend and I felt that nothing can ever come in between us. I took her for granted, and while daily kisses, goodnights, and repeating I love you was routine, I never was great at expressing my feelings further on a regular basis. Life as I saw it was set in its ways and there was no major fault. My biggest gripe to our routine was her incessant cell phone usage. Nightly after work she would be texting, on phone calls, Facebook, and this irritated me. Looking back, I probably mentioned to her about how it irritated me that she chose to be on the phone and not pay attention to myself or the kids. She didn't take my words seriously and the issue continued. As a result, I shut down with my communication further. However, I still felt that there were no major issues. We continued to live life, take date nights, have weekends away, and raise our young kids. My wife was a star at her place of work, and in July of last year, she took a new position heading a retirement community for a major corp. The place had issues from staffing to poor corporate leadership, and the residents of the community were no treat either. Within a couple of months, she was feeling that nothing she could say or do would appease the residents of the community. And the changes she wanted to implement were not fully supported by corporate leadership. The job began weighing on her early on. I did my best to listen to her complaints and supported her reasons for being disappointed and provided as much feedback as I could, since senior living is not my area of expertise. My feedback was apparently not helpful, and she had other members of the corporation to reach out to text, so her nights continued to be occupied by the cell phone. September came and we were hit by Hurricane Irma. Being 2 months into a new position, there was a lot of fast learning for her, and she had to prepare for the storm by getting her buildings ready along with coordinating supplies. Being that she was head of the building, she had no choice but to stay at the community with the residents before, during, and after the storm. She stayed at her buildings with several members of leadership from her building as well as some neighboring buildings. The kids and I rode out the storm at our home, but visited after the storm to make sure she was all right and that no help was needed. She probably did a good 3 to 4 days of staying on site and helping and leading recovery of her buildings. I remember the first week, she came home after her 3 to 4 days, took a shower, and fell asleep on the couch, only to be awoken by a call from the community calling her back. Without fail, she went back to assist. Keep this part in mind, as I will come back to it. January 28th was set to be our 12th wedding anniversary. A new year for us was starting out fantastic, since the worrisome position that my wife held was no longer going to be an issue. She had put in her notice to leave that awful job January 26th. A couple of weeks prior to this, she was already offered a new job and wanted to recruit some people she knew to come along with her to her new company. She had mentioned a guy to me in the past, saying that she wanted him to come work for her at the community she was running, but was now again mentioning him to work with her at the new company. I found this suspicious. I felt that her recruiting this person incessantly was concerning to me. I decided to do some snooping. One weekend night, while she fell asleep on the couch, I decided to go through her texts. I located his name and began reading the texts. I found that she was overly concerned with his well-being by asking every day how he was doing or making note that she would call him on her way home. This all raised red flags to me. I began researching ways to spy on her text messages at a minimum. I found out that I could run an app on my desktop provided by our cell carrier that would let me read every single one of her text messages. I wasn't going to have to go back far to read messages because she previously was using a work phone but would now be back on my plan. So, I was able to read a little over 2 weeks of text messages. While there were continuous texts regarding how you are doing, please come work for me, and flirting, he never seemed to reciprocate the flirting. After researching online for several days, I concluded that at a minimum she was having an emotional affair with this person. I decided that on January 27th, we would have a babysitter watch the kids and we would go out for drinks and I would confront her. January 27th came, and as babysitter time drew near, I went upstairs to my desk and prepared a Word document outlining the several dates, times, and texts that drew concern. With only a couple of hours to go, I felt that this was not enough evidence to confront her with, so I also started to prepare a spreadsheet outlining the several different phone numbers and the number of texts she sent or received from them. I thought this would be even further documentation to show that she was getting in too deep with this person and he may soon reciprocate on a flirtatious remark. This is where I found a second phone number that had an equally impressive number of texts. I researched this new number and found out that it was another community director from her previous company that was once in our area but had moved to a building on the west coast of FL. She had mentioned him before but nothing ever concerned me about him. Due to the sheer amount of texting going on, I decided to read through their thread. Remember, it was only a little over 2 weeks of texts. 95% of the texts were about work. The other 5% was about something soul-crushing to me. He had mentioned in his text that his wife was having lady problems. My wife responded accordingly, something along the lines of what problems. She is pregnant, so that is something. He went on to explain that she is experiencing a discharge and questioned my wife about having any STDs. My wife responded flustered and upset. She mentioned that she has been with one person over 20 years, so why would he be questioning her? She goes on to ask the question, was there anyone else besides me? My radar is going off the charts at the time I read this. I continue to read and she continues to be defensive about the questioning and then says, I am clean. Unless you gave me something. I was slowly breaking apart inside. These texts took place around January 15th. He goes on to apologize and she continues to say how crummy it is that he would ask. Earlier in this thread of texts, my wife mentions that she will be training on the west coast of FL for her new job and wanted to see if he would be around for a visit. The texting about the visit is not brought up again until closer the weekend of our anniversary, where it turns out that the plan was originally for my wife to go to him, but he decided he would go to her. She provided her itinerary and mentioned they could go to the beach area for drinks and fun. I'm slowly fainting by this point. I start to cut and paste the text, but she walks into the office as I try to work with my hands shaking. I found that I had no choice but to take the opportunity while we were alone and confront her. I ask, are you cheating on me? A look of shock comes over her face. She denies. I tell her about the text messages. She starts telling me pieces about one night during the hurricane work in September. This person came onto her and she denied his advances. She said that was all that happened. I asked why she would continue to talk to this person and she said that he told her she was pretty and did a good job. I go on about the texts implying there was something physical. She says they were jokes. I of course mention that no one jokes like that. I tell her to get this person on the phone. I grill him about if he had slept with my wife or even tried. He of course denies. I ask him about the so-called jokes and he replies that she jokes like that. In not so many words I threatened him and told him to lose my wife's number. My wife and I continue our argument where she denied there was bonding, expressed her love for only me, and blocks this guy's number from her phone. Well, once she blocked the number, his texts started to disappear from the app on my desktop unknowingly to me. I tell her to leave me alone and she proceeds to go back downstairs. The rest of the night is back and forth about how she loves me and would not do anything to hurt me. I counter that she has hurt me and we need a divorce. I come back to the desk and notice that the texts from him are all disappearing except for pictures of his daughter and him with his daughter. I think that I lost my ability to save the text but was still able to save her responses to his unseen question. I still have them saved and they hurt as much 12 days later as the day I came upon them. Our anniversary day comes and I leave the house early because I am not able to sleep at all. I head to a coffee shop and sit there for a couple hours reflecting on the previous day. I reread the text messages in my head and think to myself, maybe they were jokes. I head back home and she meets me at the door and continues to say how much she loves me and how she will do anything to fix the wrongs. I agree to review the text messages again with her so she can point out where my misunderstandings are. She has already deleted all of her texts by this point and we never really sit down to review the texts. We talk throughout the day and the back and forth involves me saying, why didn't you tell me about his past? Well, she comes at me with, you shut down and you stopped communicating with me. This leads to an afternoon of more tears and me thinking about how terrible I must be that my own wife won't tell me anything anymore. I agree to go to counseling to work on my communication issues and work on our marriage. The remainder of Sunday is great. I convince myself that she was joking in the text and that I will be more vocal about how much I love her. I slept through the night. Monday comes and the wife is off, in between jobs, and I am off to work. My commute is a long 40 minutes so I have time to think and listen to some tunes on the country station. Wouldn't you know it, a song comes on and it reminds me our situation. We all know what country songs are about, right? This gets me thinking more. I'm still troubled by the texts. I get to work and I research this guy and find that he is a former college jock that plays a specific sport that I also played. He starts to fit the persona in my head of a jock and how he would take advantage of a woman. This is just my experience and my opinion, and I know not all former jocks are like that. This guy is. I start thinking about it more at work and get more and more upset. I have to leave to prevent breaking down at the office. I start driving and call my wife to tell her we need to talk. I prepare myself during the drive. I get home and as calmly and understandable as possible I lay out that the texts were not jokes. The pass he made was not the whole story. I push and push her until she breaks. She nods to my question, "Did you sleep with him?" I collapse. I ask how long this was going on and how many times could they possibly have been together. She says it was just the hurricane and that he came into her office, undressed her, and proceeded to get physical. She said she does not remember much or how long it lasted. She stated that she did indeed push him off of her when he tried to kiss her and began to vomit. I was completely broken. Despite all of this, she continues to profess her love to me and that she will do anything to make things right. She heads off to pick up the kids from school. I take this time to phone a family member who I confide in. She hears the story and offers her suggestion to not make rash decisions about divorce and think about the kids. The wife and kids return and I decide to go for a drive where I can think and call my confidant again. I talk to my family member and she advises that it is up to me, of course, but to not make any rash decisions. I agree that she is right and return home. My wife and I continue through the night talking and decide to go to counseling. In fact, we get an appointment the next day. We go counseling and the therapist advises that she is 100% in the wrong and my communication skills are not the probably. Her choice was the problem. That was on January 30th. We have not been to a session since but did pick up a book and workbook the therapist recommended for reading and homework. We had a family vacation planned for the approaching weekend and I decide to keep the trip and try to have fun for the sake of the kids. Well, my wife and I start to reconnect and we talk better and more constructively than ever. We return home on Super Bowl Sunday and decide to have a family party and watch the game. The game goes on into the fourth quarter and we have already put the kids in bed. As it has been over the past few days, we continue to talk and as our conversation continues about our relationship and the night of infidelity, something seems off to me about her story. I was having my suspicions about her role on that night at her community. I preface my comments about that night citing that I am here to work on our relationship and will not make a rash decision. But I have to know, were you an active participant? She starts to break down, looks at me in the face and shakes her head. No. I am floored. So, this week we continue our reading and last night she gives me another play-by-play of that ill-fated night when we go to discuss the book. Her details match previous stories, but now she offers something more. She said she had laid down on her couch to review some notes and had turned on a small light next to her. She said she remembers thinking to herself that she was going to take a short nap and wake up and continue watching over the community while everyone was asleep. She said the next thing she remembers is him being over her pants are off, and he is sleeping with her. She said she felt numb. She then went to push him off. She said he got up, walked out of the room, but said that she was pretty and doing a good job as he left. She came right out and said she did not have an affair and did not ask for his advances or progression. Her reactions to the situation lead me to believe that it was X. I read up on victims and X that victims respond in different ways including freezing and not talking about it. That it is common for the victim to actually remain friends with their attacker. My dilemmas, and thanks for reading and giving any input if available. She wants to forget about it and move on with us. I have verified that she has not had any contact with this person since I confronted her. Filing any type of police report will result in a he said, she said because her text messages do not imply she was not willing. Bringing lawyers in could jeopardize her career and reputation because she is still in the same industry. She said that he called her to talk 2 weeks after the incident. He reasoned with her saying that they were both under a lot of stress and that they still have to work together so they should keep it quiet. He went on to act like nothing happened and she followed suit. She agreed with the understanding that they are never to be in the same room alone again. When I question her about the continued communication, she now sees that he was just trying to save face because he has a family and didn't want to ruin his sweet deal. She has said that the trip to the West Coast was to include his wife when they were to go out. She now is seeing how he was going to use her and only show up alone. He was moved by the corporation in December to the West Coast location and has not been back since. Sorry, now my questions. I do not know where to start. I am torn about her story of X. While I have located articles supporting her behavior, it is still hard to process that she would have anything to do with this guy after something so traumatic. She has stated that she is relieved it is out and loves me more than anything. I plan on bringing the new discoveries up in our next counseling session to see the therapist's reaction and to see if my wife sticks to the story she has told. Please let me know your thoughts or questions. Next is the other man's spouse. Do I tell her? She is 6 months pregnant. Scumbag impregnated her, sent her away for the hurricane, and helped himself to my wife. I do not want this information to affect her unborn child. I know, I am thinking more about his family than he did. If I do so, any suggestion on best way? I thought Facebook Messenger might work. Lastly, anybody know when I will stop dwelling on all this and be able to sleep at night? I do love my wife and will work with counseling, but it is the hardest thing I have ever had to go through in my life. I just want to address a few questions and maybe ask one or two more myself. In regard to the STDs, I visited my PCP earlier this week and I discussed what happened. He advised that since I have not shown any symptoms, there is a very rare chance that I contracted something. A blood test was done and I should have the results from that in regard to HIV sometime next week, I believe. Next, I did not state in my Opus post that the visit while she was training on the West Coast was known by me and not hidden. Of course, I knew about this before I discovered the texts. Lastly, the individual who I originally thought was the OM has only had one contact with her, and that was via a text. I read the text and he innocently was asking where or what she was up to. Her reply was that she is taking advantage of her time away from the old position to focus and reconnect with me and the kids. After an awful year, and that was it. This was 10 days ago. She has basically given up her phone and over the last 2 weeks has rarely been on it. The new job will not be as consuming as the previous, and I do not anticipate further phone issues. I think the most difficult part for me is the roller coaster ride of emotions that I am going through. A vast majority of you think that the lies are still there and continuing, and I appreciate the harsh reality. It is so difficult to have an unbiased perspective when you are the one affected. I mean, look at how I initially handled the whole joke thing. Any more thoughts on confronting the OM spouse? This is another area where I wonder if it will personally help me move on. I sit and ponder about it so much that it may very well be blocking my ability to move on. Is it for revenge or is it because I would like to know if I was in her shoes? I don't know. As with most traumatic experiences in life, I will heal but be scarred. I'll do it with or without her, and hopefully I become a better person because of this and am able to raise upstanding children who never have to go through this pain. My comment: your W is lying and minimizing. The text conversation between OM and your W that concerned discharge from the other man pregnant W was too familiar, friendly. In short, if other man did in fact rape your W, then texting to check on any STD would not be in the cards. Other man would look to bury it as deep as possible. The only good that came from that text is it appears it was one time. Second, your W said in the text she was with only one person in 20 years. That would be you. I would take that as the only truth in this matter.